At this point, you already know how all of this started. It all began when Goji Center made a video upgrading the Indominus Rex into something much more deadlier. A walking extinction event who goes by the nickname Indominus 2.0. And after that video came out, it didn't take long for someone to pose a challenge to the Indominus 2.0. A YouTuber known as Goji Guy made his own video creating his own hybrid to defeat the Indominus 2.0. His hybrid is well known as Hank. And, well, you know the gist of it. This hybrid just didn't do well against the Indominus 2.0, simply because Hank was simply not too realistic enough to fight the Indominus. However, despite this massive epic fail, Goji Guy's attempt would spark a new trend that would literally surf around the internet. A trend that is now known as the Great Hybrid War. Literally everyone put their creativity to the test by making their own hybrids that would be efficient enough to defeat the Indominus 2.0. And all of this led to Goji Center literally making a tournament to see which hybrid would be strong enough to defeat the Indominus 2.0. If you've been around my channel for this long, then you would know that I eventually created my own hybrid to participate in the tournament. However, the process isn't exactly easy, as I would later find out that creating an hybrid isn't a walk in the park. It demands a lot of consideration in terms of what contributors you want to use for your creature. At the same time, a lot of research had to be done in order for me to at least know if the contributors that I chose were actually efficient enough to actually work for the hybrid in terms of function and even realism. However, despite all of this, there was only one thing that stayed on point, and that's the fact that I wanted my hybrid to be unique. After all, I was inspired by everyone else's more unique hybrids out there in the community, so I also wanted to give it a try on creating a unique hybrid. Even so, there was still one question that remained in my mind. What type of hybrid do I want to create? Obviously not a dinosaur, since that's already been done by a lot of people at this point. Mammals could be a good option, but there is also a lot of limitation when it comes of sizing up a mammal or using a mammal as the main genome and then adding more contributors, which could be problematic. And while a bird hybrid could also be a neat idea, well, it's already been done by Zen Reborn in his really cool hybrid Maddie, and also there is limitation when it comes of how big a bird can get. So there was only one group of animal that I had for an option. And unsurprisingly enough, it's one of my favorite group of animals. Reptiles. And already I knew what I wanted to pick for the main genome. And it's an animal that is in the same family as the Komodo dragon. Megalania. And you know the gist. Taking that as my option and also doing the research for the contributors, Basilisk was born. Although, interestingly enough, that wasn't the original idea. In fact, the design that you're looking right now isn't even Basilisk's original design. Originally, the contributors would have been a lot different, with the only thing that stayed the same being the main genome, that being still Megalania. However, originally I was more thinking of giving him contributors from other reptiles, more specifically crocodiles. So essentially, Basilisk was originally going to be a giant Megalania with different attributes from different members of the crocodilian species. But of course, that idea was eventually rejected, and instead I decided to choose more efficient contributors than just anything that is from the crocodilian species, because back then I thought that it just wouldn't work. Though admittedly, I didn't exactly do a lot of research back then for this original idea, and all of the research that I used were mostly for the Basilisk that we have right now, of course, and the one that you're looking at. But yeah, despite this very complicated process, I still went ahead and created my baby boy known as Basilisk. And after finalizing his design and all of the other stuff about him, I proceeded to submit him to the Great Hybrid War, and I was crossing my finger that he would get to a higher ranking, or at least manage to get on the top 16 rank and fight the Indominus 2.0. And, well... Yep, he got rejected unfortunately, and he basically got nothing. Like, I mean, I guess me thinking that him getting to the top 16 rank would have been just pointless hope. But I don't know, I was kind of hoping he would get at least to the honorable mentions, given how unique he was. But nope, instead he got the short end of the stick. And not gonna lie, I was pretty disappointed when that happened. But at the end, I decided to move on and just not think about it because, well, there was no point complaining about it. Besides, at the end of the day, I'm still very proud of creating my baby boy. The one thing that I did was modify some of his contributors after receiving a comment that said that one of the original contributors that Basilisk had wasn't exactly very helpful, so I needed to change it. And after reading that comment and taking the time to actually change some of the contributors of the hybrid, I think he should be good now. So, after the conclusion of the original Great Hybrid War, I thought that Basilisk could just rest since there is no more tournaments for him to participate. I mean, granted, there was the Sky Hybrid War that was happening at the same time, but that's a tournament dedicated for flying hybrids, and I already created 2 hybrids for this tournament. So I guess you could say that Basilisk could happily rest without having to worry about anything. Well, that sure didn't age well. Oh, the Great Hybrid Tournament. By far the most unexpected tournament to come out yet. This tournament, presented by Valis Dreadmere, is unique in 2 ways. For once, rather than creating an hybrid to fight a specific hybrid, everyone is against each other. Like, everyone created their own hybrids to fight other people's hybrids, which honestly is really a neat concept. Secondly, there is a theme surrounding this tournament, and it's basically the Cenozoic era. Basically, if you wanted to participate in this tournament, then the main genome of your hybrid has to be an animal that has existed in that time period. The Cenozoic era being the time of the mammals, after the extinction of the dinosaurs. Now, interestingly enough, I was actually tagged by Valis to join this tournament. And after some thought, which if you want to know more, I recommend watching this video that is practically about my submission to this tournament, I ended up joining the Great Hybrid Tournament in the end. However, the process was interesting to say the least. So originally, I had an idea for a new hybrid that was originally meant to be submitted to the Great Hybrid Tournament. This new hybrid was essentially a combination of both stamina and teamwork, while also using a reptile as the main genome. But at the end, this idea ended up being dropped. Well, okay, maybe not dropped. I'm still planning to create this hybrid either way, but the submission for this new hybrid didn't happen in the end, mainly because I noticed how a lot of people are using a lot of the giant mammals or like giant animals from the Cenozoic era as their main genome, which isn't a bad thing. I'm not saying it's something that is bad, although it does create like few limitation in terms of like what you want to use when everyone else is just using the giant megafauna. So essentially, I had very few options in terms of who I wanted to submit to the tournament. Until I remembered that I actually have an hybrid that actually uses an animal from the Cenozoic era as its main genome. And that hybrid failed to participate in the first tournament. Yep, from the sound of it, I think it's clear what happened. Basilisk gets a second chance. However, this second chance isn't so easily given, as I had to check if Basilisk actually respected the rules of the tournament. And fortunately enough, he did. And while Basilisk isn't as ginormous as the other hybrids that people submitted to this tournament, I feel like he would be at least big enough to at least pose a challenge to them. Because the original hybrid that I was originally going to submit to this tournament wasn't really all that big. If I have to argue, the original hybrid was probably around the same height as like any big cat, but like it wouldn't be like big enough to try to fight the giants of the tournament. And well, yes, Basilisk isn't like ginormous. I feel like he would be big enough to at least pose a challenge. But yeah, Basilisk was back at action. And honestly, I was very excited at that moment, because seeing how this tournament was built compared to Goji Center's original Hybrid War, I knew for a fact that Basilisk had better hopes in participating than he did last time. And I was very thrilled to see how he would do in this tournament. Unfortunately, I wouldn't be able to see it. Why? Because this happened. Valis Dredmir made an announcement on his community post saying that he will unfortunately put the Great Hybrid Tournament in indefinite hiatus and cease content creation on YouTube. The reason for this is due to the fact that his computer died on him while he was using it to work on the tournament, and a lot of stuff has also been happening to him in his personal life. And while I do think it's unfortunate to see a talented content creator go like this, I do understand the decision that he made, and I wish him the very best. However, this meant that the Great Hybrid Tournament wasn't going to happen. Well, not quite. You see, Valis actually made a lot of posts in his community post showing us how the tournament would have played out by giving us the results. However, this decision became controversial, to say the least, as it practically enraged the hybrid community in the worst way possible. For the record, I won't be talking about it here since that's not the point. I already gave my thoughts on this situation in the community post, so if you wanna know my thoughts, you can go ahead and read that. And who knows, maybe in the future I'll probably make a video on this situation, but only time will tell. But all I can say is that a lot of people, mainly the participants, weren't exactly happy with the results. And while I can understand that, a lot of the reactions were really ridiculous. Now the question remains, how did Basilisk do in these results? Well, according to the results of the first round, Basilisk actually won his first mashup and was able to get in the second round, although he did lose the second round against the hybrid known as Diablo. Though I do think it's actually pretty cool to know that Basilisk actually managed to pass the first round, although I will admit the first mashup that he had is questionable to say the least. For those who don't know, Mina is a Paleoloxodon hybrid. And yeah, I think that's pretty much self-explanatory on how questionable this matchup is. Now, from what I can understand in terms of how the tournament would have played out, all mashups in the first round will be random, meaning that all hybrids are pitted against each other randomly, which I can understand that. Though I do have to question, why the heck is Basilisk pitted against an animal that is way bigger than him? Basilisk is almost the same size as an African elephant, and Mina over here is literally taller than the African elephant because she's a Paleoloxodon hybrid. Maybe there's some stuff that we're missing there that explains why Basilisk won the battle. Kinda like how this user there, known as Ives Jasa, oh my god, I must have butchered that, I'm sorry if I did. He posted a comment in one of my posts explaining how Basilisk won the battle. But given that these results seem to be not definitive, we will probably not know. And if Valis actually went ahead and actually did the tournament like he originally planned out, perhaps there could be an explanation. Although I don't know if that explains the questionable mashup that Basilisk had in his first round. Either way, this is another L for Basilisk because even though he did good in this tournament, at least the first round, all of this is showcased in a few posts with no video prepared for it. I do want to clarify that I'm not blaming Valis for this. I do understand that life gets in the way in a lot of stuff, which trust me I would know too. Though I can't say or lie that I'm not disappointed, which I am. I am kinda disappointed how all of this turned out. But honestly, at the end of the day, I think it's best to just move on and not think about it too much. Unlike the community who has been on fire when this happened. Man, for a 1-year anniversary, this isn't exactly going smoothly for Basilisk. Has there really not been anything good to him? Well... Even though Basilisk doesn't really have a good relationship with tournaments, he's at least gotten some nice stuff from the community. The first thing that Basilisk received is actually a legitimate battle against someone else's hybrid. Goji Headquarters essentially made a hybrid of his own to challenge Basilisk, and it's another reptilian hybrid that is almost quite similar to Basilisk in terms of contributor. However, the video that he made explaining the battle between the two isn't available. And that sucks because that's now lost media. Although I'm guessing the reason he did it was mainly to the fact that during that time, Goji Headquarters was giving away most of his hybrids to other people, and Bella's was one of them, which, by the way, I happen to be the one to have her in my collection. Would these two get along? Probably not. But aside from that, other stuff that Basilisk has received are fan arts. Yeah, Basilisk has received a pretty big amount of fan arts, which, okay, saying pretty big is a bit exaggerated, but it's almost quite a lot, I'll say. And I gotta say, these fan arts look absolutely amazing. My baby boy is all grown up. Also, don't worry, I'll credit the artist at the end of the video. Returning to Goji Headquarters, Basilisk was featured in one of his projects known as Hybrid Alliance, which is essentially the Avengers, but with hybrids. He's featured in the video titled Hybrid Alliance vs Lieutenant, where him, alongside other hybrids, joined forces to fight a robot and his army. Unfortunately, Basilisk doesn't really get much screen time in this video. In fact, he only gets 3 screenshots and then in the third one he's already dead. And I do want to clarify that I have nothing against Goji Headquarters, but I do have to admit that this was pretty disappointing, as the hype that I had for this was just kinda wasted. But despite Basilisk receiving the Idora treatment from Final Wars, it was pretty cool seeing him with all of these other hybrids. And I guess one last thing with Goji Headquarters, he did make this pretty cool action figure of Basilisk, which is awesome. Basilisk now has merchandise, and his horn is pink, which I approve. And finally, Basilisk was featured in this video by Stitch Z, which is essentially a size comparison between hybrids, and he was also featured alongside Team Mythical. Honestly, seeing how far Basilisk has gone with all of this, it really is a nice journey for him. And who knows, maybe more will await him in the future. Wow, 1 year. 1 year and all of this has happened. And oh boy, I can't tell you guys how much I am proud and happy with how far Basilisk has gone through, honestly. Like, I'm really happy with everything that has been happening with him, honestly. Like, it's something that I never thought would happen with, like, one of my creations, and it happened. And I don't know, all I can say is just I'm just happy and proud. I'm literally like a proud father. That's what's going on. I'm a proud father, proud of his son for going through all of this. And yeah, 1 year has passed since his introduction, and a lot of stuff has happened literally outside of my channel, because so far all I did with him outside of his introduction, I had the video modifying his contributors, that video with how he would sound, essentially his sound effects. Of course, the mini-series titled Hybrid Face-Off, where Basilisk would face off against multiple hybrids from other people, which I'm still working on. And of course, his submission to the Great Hybrid Tournament. Meanwhile, he's gotten everything outside of my channel. And again, I'm really happy and proud with how far he's been through. And honestly, all I can say is just thank you. Thank you to everyone who was able to make this possible. Basilisk really has a special place in my heart, as in terms of character creation, he's essentially a character that you need to essentially use real-life science to make him plausible, which honestly, it's something that I never thought I would do. Like, I never thought that I would actually use real-life science to create him, but I did it, and I'm very proud with how it turned out. I mean, granted, it definitely isn't perfect, but I'm still proud with how it turned out, and I'm very happy that I also created other hybrids thanks to him. Now, the future is certainly a mystery for him and his fellow hybrids. As concerning Project Hybrid, the series that he's in along with the other hybrids, that's something I'll have to take time and see when I can get to work on. And in terms of Basilisk 2.0, that's something that is still up for discussion. But overall, happy 1 year anniversary, Basilisk. You may be an underdog, but you ain't a quitter. And that's all I've got to say. I'm the Godzilla Reader, and I'll see you guys in another video.
Again.